It started as a wallpaper idea, but the experiment failed. People didn't understand it. Some even called it a toy. Until one day, a big company decided to give a chance. And from that moment, the pop sound started to echo around the world. But did they really manage to sell it everywhere? Or did the bubble burst before it ever made it? Before bubble wrap became the protector of fragile packages. Before that, pop sound became everyone's favorite stress relief. This invention started as a failed experiment, made by two men obsessed with air and plastic. It was 1957. In a small, messy garage in New Jersey, two men were building something they couldn't fully explain. They weren't designers, not tech geniuses, but they had a big dream, and they were brave enough to risk everything for it. Marc Chavannes was a chemical engineer from Switzerland. He often said, "The walls of the future shouldn't be flat. They should breathe. They should feel alive." Alfred was a mechanical engineer from New Jersey. He was logical, quiet, and often confused by Marc's wild ideas, but he listened, and he joined him. They had already turned down safer projects. They gave up time, money, and comfort, all to chase one strange idea. Marc had spent years studying how to shape and texture plastic. Alfred built machines to press, heat, and seal plastic with precision. Together, they had the skills. What they didn't have yet was a clear purpose. Until one night, Marc said, "What if we press two sheets of plastic together and trap air inside? Bubble wallpaper." The name sounded like a joke, but they meant it. Marc imagined modern living rooms with walls that looked like the surface of the moon, soft, round, shiny like marshmallows. Walls that made people say, "Wow." Alfred looked at the sketch and said, "If that's the future of home design, then let's build it." So they worked. They pressed plastic. They tested heat. They sealed the edges. And the result? Sheets of bubbly, clear plastic. Funny looking, soft, and yes, strange. Still, they believed. They took the product to a design fair, ready to impress the world. But instead, people stared. They laughed. They whispered, "This looks like frozen food wrap." My kid would pop all those bubbles in 5 minutes. Plastic? On the wall? Really? They came home with their product. Untouched. Unwanted. But they didn't give up yet. Marc had another idea. What if it's not for walls? What if we use it in greenhouses to keep the plants warm? Air means insulation, right? But the tests failed. The plastic kept the heat too well. It made the greenhouse feel like a sauna. 2 ideas. 2 rejections. And now, 2 tired inventors sitting in a quiet garage, surrounded by rolls of unused bubble sheets. Marc took a sip of coffee. He looked at the plastic like it was mocking him. Then he pressed a bubble. Pop. Alfred looked up. Pressed another. Pop. They both chuckled. Not because it was funny, but because it still gave them something. Even after all that, we made something nobody needs, but it's weirdly satisfying. In that quiet moment, in a garage full of failure, they didn't see success, but they heard it, a tiny sound. Pop. They didn't know it yet, but that sound would soon save a very expensive computer, and later, millions of packages, memories, and minds. In the middle of failure, the rolls of bubble plastic were still there, stacked in the corner of the garage, silent, like a failed idea refusing to disappear. Alfred and Marc had already been laughed at twice. First, when they tried to sell it as futuristic wallpaper. Second, when they offered it as greenhouse insulation. And now, they sat across from each other. Their coffee had gone cold. Their hope was fading. Not because they were lazy or foolish, but because they didn't know what to do next. "Maybe it's time to stop," Alfred said quietly. Marc didn't answer. He just kept reading the newspaper. Then his eyes stopped on one headline: IBM to launch new computer. Shipping becomes a big problem. The IBM 1401 was large, expensive, and very sensitive. Even the smallest shock during transport could damage it. Repairs would cost thousands of dollars. The risk was too high. Marc folded the paper and looked at Alfred. "Fred, look at this. They don't need decoration. They need protection." For the first time, they weren't thinking about how something looked. They were thinking about what it could do. They picked up one of the leftover sheets of bubble plastic. They wrapped it around a fragile object, then dropped it onto the floor. It didn't break. They tried again, and for the first time, the plastic worked. It wasn't art. It wasn't design. It was function. Maybe this was its true purpose. But one more challenge remained. If we send this to IBM, it's our last chance, said Alfred. If it fails, we're done. So they did it. They packed a sample, wrote a letter, and sent it to IBM. Then, they waited. Day 1, silence. Day 2, nothing. Day 3, still no call. The only sound was them pressing bubbles, one by one. Pop, think they threw it in the trash. Pop, maybe they use it to wrap their lunch, Marc joked bitterly. But somewhere far from their garage, inside an IBM facility, things were moving. A technician opened the box. He looked at the strange, bubbly plastic. No labels, no instructions, just sheets of air. They had no better option. Carefully, they wrapped one of the IBM 1401 units in the plastic, layer by layer. Then they placed it inside a wooden crate. And then they dropped it, not by accident, but as part of their internal testing. Silence. They opened the crate. Inside, the computer was intact. No cracks, no scratches. The system check came back. Everything normal. No one clapped. No one cheered. They just nodded and approved it for use. The plastic had done its job. On the 4th day, the phone finally rang. Alfred picked it up. Hello. Yes. Really? It arrived safely. No damage. Thank you. Thank you so much. He hung up, sat still, then looked at Marc. They like it. The computer arrived safe. We did it. No celebration. No champagne. Just one simple thing. Alfred sat down, took a piece of plastic, pressed a bubble. Pop, we still don't have a name for this thing. Marc remembered the names they used before. Textured plastic laminate. Air cushion sheet. Too long. Too boring. Alfred looked at the plastic again, pressed another bubble. Pop, we wrap things. And it has bubbles. Bubble wrap. The name stuck like a pop that echoes. For the first time, the plastic had a purpose, a function, and finally, a name. In 1960, after the quiet success with IBM, Alfred Fielding and Marc Chavannes agreed. They couldn't stop with just one computer. Their product, this strange sheet of plastic bubbles, needed a chance to grow. They created a small company called Sealed Air Corporation. Their first office, a tiny room on the edge of town. The walls smelled like fresh wood. The machines were simple, almost homemade. But their hopes were big. The plastic now had a name, bubble wrap, and they believed the world would someday need it. But not everyone agreed. In the first few weeks, they sent free samples to logistics companies and packaging stores. The feedback? Cold. Too strange. Too expensive. Plastic? Why not just use paper? This looks like a toy. Some people even laughed and called it a children's plaything, not a serious tool. Meanwhile, production continued. The machines kept running. More bubbles were made. But money? It started to run out. They had almost no buyers. Their early investors started to worry. Are you really just selling air? Marc wanted to experiment more, make bigger bubbles, new colors. Alfred wanted to stop testing and start selling what they already had. Workers became nervous. Salaries were late. Confidence was fading. Then came a big moment, a product demo in front of new investors. They prepared a small presentation. Basic slides, simple words. But the most important part? A test using a raw egg, wrapped in bubble wrap, dropped from above. The demo started. They wrapped the egg carefully. Marc stood on the table. He dropped it onto the hard floor. Thud. Silence. Everyone watched as they unwrapped the egg. Slowly. And it cracked. The egg broke. A small smell filled the room. One investor covered his nose. Another tried not to laugh. Marc looked at Alfred. Alfred looked away. A demo meant to prove everything had just failed. A few days later, the investors pulled out. The phone stopped ringing. They paused production. Inside the office, now quiet, Marc sat alone. He held a sheet of bubble wrap, pressed the bubbles one by one. Pop, pop, pop. But then, One letter arrived. A small company that shipped fragile glass had tested their product. "We used your wrap last week. Everything arrived safely. No damage. We'd like to order more." Just one small order, but it was enough to bring back hope. Then a local logistics company tried it. Then a ceramic store. And slowly, one order became many. They weren't begging the market anymore. Now, the market was starting to come to them. Bubble wrap was no longer waiting to be accepted. It was finally being needed. For the first time since the company was born, Marc and Alfred stood inside their small factory and watched the machines come back to life. In between the hum of production, there was still one small sound that never disappeared. At first, bubble wrap was only made to protect fragile items. But soon, it started to protect something even more delicate, the human mind. After its success in the packaging industry, bubble wrap began to appear everywhere. Not just inside cardboard boxes, but also on desks and school bags and inside messy office drawers. People began to press it, not because they had to, but because they wanted to. That small pop sound, somehow, made everything feel better. Psychologists call it the satisfaction loop. When you press one bubble and hear pop, the brain releases dopamine, the same chemical that makes us feel relaxed, happy, or relieved. Bubble wrap became the cheapest self-therapy in the world. No medicine, no instructions, just your hands and a soft sound that tells you it's going to be okay. A teacher once shared a story about an autistic student who felt calm just by holding bubble wrap. In offices, people hid small rolls in drawers. For those moments when work was too much and life felt too loud. Pop. Sometimes that was the only sound that made sense. Then the world turned digital and bubble wrap followed. Pop the Bubble apps appeared on phones. Simple games. ASMR videos with the sound of popping, watched by millions online. Even in a world of screens, the bubble never disappeared. Media joined in. Bubble wrap showed up in TV shows, comedy skits, films, and memes. Used for costumes, for jokes, sometimes just for fun. What people once laughed at became a symbol of comfort in the modern world. And then, something official happened. Since 2001, the last Monday of every January is now Bubble Wrap Appreciation Day. In schools, kids make artwork from it. In offices, workers open a roll just to do one thing, press. Listen, let go. There's a sweet irony in all of this. Back then, they didn't know how to sell it. Now, people buy it as a birthday gift. Once laughed at, now copied, even in digital form. Once called a failed idea, now used in therapy rooms. Some therapy clinics today use bubble wrap to help patients with sensory issues. One small thing that can reduce stress without using a single word. Today, bubble wrap is more than just a tool to protect packages. It protects emotions. It's a silent friend that knows sometimes we just need one soft sound. Pop. And suddenly, the day feels easier. Not every legacy comes in the form of a street name, a statue, or a medal. Sometimes, a legacy comes as a small bubble filled with air and relief. In 1994, two friends who once failed to invent futuristic wallpaper, Alfred and Marc Chavannes, passed away. They didn't become billionaires. Their names aren't in most history books. But without knowing it, they changed the world forever. Before they died, they left behind more than a product. They left behind a group of patents. One of them, U.S. patent number 3,142,599, protected the way to make air-filled plastic. In total, they filed 6 major patents covering bubble wrap's process and tools. These patents helped them build a small company in 1960, Sealed Air Corporation. And today, Sealed Air has become a global packaging company working in over 200 locations worldwide, with yearly revenue of more than $5.5 billion. Their main brands include Bubble Wrap, Cryovac, Autobag, and more. They now have over 2,700 active patents and applications, including a biodegradable version of Bubble Wrap and air-based protection used in medical surgeries to guard human organs. One bubble turned into thousands of ideas. Even so, None of Alfred or Marc's family members continued the business. There was no family takeover, no dynasty. What's left is the story, and that little sound. Pop Howard Fielding, Alfred's son, once shared. He was the first child to ever pop a bubble wrap before the world even knew its name. And he remembered, my dad never talked about money, but he was always proud when he saw someone popping bubble wrap on the street. Today, you might not know the name Alfred Fielding. You may have never heard of Marc Chavannes, but you know bubble wrap. You popped it. You felt a little piece from that simple sound. That is true legacy. A small invention, born from failure. Not made to be famous, but made to be useful. And maybe, in this world that moves too fast, sounds too loud, and feels too complex, bubble wrap reminds us of something important. That solutions don't have to be complicated. That comfort can come from something small. And that, even the quietest sound can last forever. Pop. This story popped beautifully.